The first sign something was wrong came with the whiskey. My wife Elara poured Mason Reddan, her boss, 3 fingers of my best Macallan without asking. The bottle I'd been saving for tonight, my 33rd birthday. "This is exceptional," Mason said, swirling the amber liquid like he owned it. "Kellan, you've got excellent taste for an engineer." "Former engineer," I corrected, watching him drain half the glass in one gulp. "Consulting now." Elara shot me a look, the kind that used to mean, play nice with my colleagues. Now it felt different, sharper, like she was warning me about something I should already know. "Right, the consulting thing," Mason continued, settling deeper into my favorite chair. "How's that working out? Must be tough, all those late nights Elara mentions." I paused, fork halfway to my mouth. "Late nights?" "You know," Mason waved his hand dismissively. "All that snoring she complains about. Keeps the whole house awake, she says." The dining room went quiet. My parents, Sam and Greg Brooks, had been making polite conversation with Elara's friend Talia, but now everyone was staring. Because here's the thing about that comment. I don't snore. Never have. Elara used to joke that I slept like a statue, but someone who'd been sleeping next to her recently might think I did. "Mason," Elara laughed, too loud and too long, "you're thinking of someone else." "Am I?" He grinned, and I caught something predatory in it. My mistake. I set down my fork carefully. The engineering part of my brain, the part that solved problems by breaking them into components, started working. Component 1, Mason knows details about our bedroom. Component 2, Elara is nervous. Component 3, she's been working late a lot recently. "So Mason," my mother said, her voice carrying that particular edge she got when someone insulted family, "what exactly do you do at the company?" "I'm vice president of strategic development," he replied, puffing up. "Elara's been invaluable to our expansion projects. Haven't you, sweetheart?" Sweetheart. In my house, at my birthday dinner. "Just doing my job," Elara muttered, refilling Mason's glass again. Still not asking. My father cleared his throat. Dad had worked construction for 30 years before retiring, and he had a gift for reading people. Right now, he was reading Mason like a blueprint, and he didn't like what he saw. "Kellan," Talia chimed in, clearly trying to change the subject. "Elara mentioned you might be traveling soon for work?" I blinked. "Traveling?" "The Portland project," Elara said quickly. "Remember, the one we discussed?" We hadn't discussed any Portland project. I'd remember that conversation, especially since I'd been struggling to land new clients since the layoff 3 months ago, the layoff Elara had sworn to keep between us. "Oh, right," Mason said. "That's the same week Elara and I are heading to Boston for the Morrison account. Funny coincidence. Boston. Together. Same week as a project that didn't exist." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger yet. That would come later. This was recognition. The moment when scattered pieces suddenly formed a picture you didn't want to see. "Actually," I said, standing slowly, "I think there might be some confusion about my schedule." Everyone looked at me. Elara's face had gone pale. "See, I've been pretty careful about tracking my projects lately. Have to be, with the consulting business. Every hour matters when you're building something from scratch." I walked to the sideboard where I'd left my phone. Especially after getting laid off. You know how it is, Mason. Oh, wait. You wouldn't know, would you? Since that's supposed to be private information. The room went completely silent. "Kellan," Elara started, but I held up a hand. "No, it's interesting. Because I never told anyone at your company about the layoff. Just you. And here's Mason, talking about my late nights and my work schedule like he's been getting regular updates." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I picked up my phone, opened the folder I'd been hoping I'd never have to use, and connected it to our TV screen. The first image appeared, a text message thread between Elara and Mason. Mason, can't wait for Boston. Hotel has a great spa. Elara, as long as Kay doesn't suspect he's been weird lately. Mason, your husband's too trusting, and too boring to figure it out. Elara, don't underestimate him. He's smarter than he looks. Mason, smart enough to lose his job and not tell anyone but you? The messages kept scrolling, weeks of them. Plans, complaints about me, intimate details about our marriage, our finances, our problems. Everything I'd shared with my wife, packaged up and delivered to her boss like entertainment. Happy birthday to me, I said quietly. Mason had gone white. Elara was staring at the screen like it might disappear if she concentrated hard enough. Kellan, I can explain, she started. Can you? Because I've got about 200 more of these, including the ones where you two discuss how to handle things if I found out. Something about making me look unstable, paranoid. That was a nice touch. My father stood up, all 6 feet and 2 inches of him, hands clenched at his sides. You want to explain to me why you're talking about my son like that? Mason tried to recover. This is all taken out of context. Context? I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. Let me give you some context. I scrolled to another folder. Financial records, credit card statements, hotel bookings, 3 trips to Boston in the last 2 months, always the same hotel, always the same room type, always billed to the company account that you control, Mason. Funny thing about being a consultant, you learn to research everything, including corporate expense policies. The doorbell rang. Perfect timing. That'll be our final guest, I said, walking toward the front door. I invited someone special to help us celebrate. I opened the door to find Mason Reddan standing on my porch, elegant and composed, holding a manila folder thick with documents. Helena, I said warmly, so glad you could make it. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Mason's wife. The sound Mason made wasn't quite a word, more like air being let out of a tire. Helena walked into the dining room with the confidence of someone who'd been planning this moment for weeks. Because she had been, ever since I'd contacted her with my suspicions and she'd shared a few of her own. Hello, darling, she said to Mason, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. Surprise. She opened the folder and spread the contents across my birthday cake. Financial records, hotel receipts, photographs, and a thick stack of printed emails. I've been having the most interesting conversations with the company's accounting department, Helena continued. Did you know that corporate funds used for personal entertainment constitute embezzlement, especially when the amounts exceed $10,000? Mason tried to stand, but his legs seemed to have stopped working properly. And Elara, Helena turned to my wife, I particularly enjoyed your emails about Kellan's emotional problems and how they might be affecting his stability. Very creative fiction. The HR department at your company found them fascinating too. You sent these to HR? Elara's voice cracked. Yesterday, Helena confirmed, along with a formal complaint about hostile work environment and misuse of company resources. I believe they're planning to review everything on Monday. I looked around the room. My parents sat frozen, watching the destruction of my marriage with the same horrified fascination you'd give a car accident. Talia had pulled out her phone and was frantically typing, probably texting everyone she knew. Mason looked like he was about to be ill all over my dining room table. And Elara, my wife of 6 years. The woman I'd supported through graduate school, through her early career struggles, through her father's passing last year. She was staring at me with something I'd never seen before. Fear. The really beautiful part, I said, pouring myself a glass of the whiskey Mason had been guzzling, is that I didn't have to lie about anything. I didn't have to manipulate anyone or create fake evidence. I just had to pay attention, document what was actually happening, let you both dig your own graves with your own shovels. I raised the glass in a toast. Happy birthday to me, and thank you all for the gift of clarity. It's exactly what I needed. That was the moment I stopped being Elara's husband and started being her reckoning. The house felt different after everyone left. Bigger somehow, like it was exhaling for the first time in months. Mason had stumbled out first, Helena following with a satisfied smile and a promise to call me with updates. My parents had stayed long enough to help clean up and offer to let me stay with them, an offer I'd politely declined. Talia had practically sprinted to her car, phone already pressed to her ear. Elara had tried to stay, tried to explain, to justify, to minimize. I'd listened for exactly 3 minutes before walking to our bedroom, packing a suitcase with her essentials and setting it by the front door. "Kellan, please, we can work through this." "No," I'd said simply. "We can't." Now I sat in my study, the room I'd claimed as my office when we'd bought the house. Elara had never liked it. Too dark, too cluttered with my engineering textbooks and project files. Too much like me, probably. I opened my laptop and began making lists. Not revenge fantasies, I'm not that kind of person. Practical lists, legal considerations, financial implications. Steps to protect myself from whatever Mason and Elara might try next. Because they would try something. People like that always did. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Evan. "Heard from Talia about dinner. You okay?" I called him instead of texting back. "Jesus, Kellan," Evan answered on the first ring. "Talia's been blowing up social media for the last hour. Says you ambushed Elara with some kind of slideshow?" "Something like that." I leaned back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. "How much has she shared?" "Enough that half the city knows your wife's been fooling around with her boss. The other half will know by morning." Evan owned a bar downtown, Murphy's Tap. Nothing fancy, but it was the kind of place where people talked, and Evan was the kind of bartender who listened. If gossip was spreading, he'd hear it first. "Any word from Mason's side of things?" "Funny you should ask. He showed up here about 20 minutes ago, 3 sheets to the wind and ranting about lawsuits and defamation. Had to cut him off and call him a cab." I sat up straighter. "What kind of lawsuits?" "The kind desperate men threaten when they're cornered. Said you doctored those messages somehow. Claims he's got connections, can make your life difficult." "Let him try." I was already opening another folder on my laptop. "I've got enough documentation to bury him twice over. Helena made sure of that." "Speaking of Helena, I like her. She stopped by after Mason left. Wanted to make sure you were handling things okay. Classy lady. She's been planning this longer than I have. Apparently Mason's been sloppy about covering his tracks for years. I just gave her the excuse she needed to act on it." We talked for another few minutes, Evan offering to come over, me declining. I needed to think, to plan. Mason's threats didn't worry me. Desperate people make mistakes, and I was counting on that. But I wasn't naive enough to think this was over. After hanging up, I spent 2 hours going through financial records, changing passwords, and securing our joint accounts. Elara had been living off my consulting income while spending her salary on clothes, spa treatments, and apparently hotel rooms with Mason. She'd find herself significantly more limited starting tomorrow. At midnight, my phone rang. "Elara." "The locks," she said without preamble. "You changed the locks." "It's my house, my name on the deed, my money for the down payment. You remember? Back when you were still pretending to love me. Don't be cruel, Kellan." "Cruel?" I almost laughed. "Elara, you spent months feeding our private conversations to your lover like entertainment. You planned to gaslight me about my own mental health if I caught on. And now you're worried about me being cruel? Where am I supposed to go? I hear Mason has a nice apartment downtown. Or had. Helena might have something to say about that arrangement now." Silence on the other end. Then, "You're going to regret this." "Am I?" "You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you've started. Mason has resources, connections. He can make sure you never work in this city again." Interesting threat. "Mind if I record this conversation? For my lawyer?" The line went quiet for a long moment. "You're not recording anything," she said finally. but her voice had lost its confidence. Actually, I am. Started recording the moment you called. It's amazing what you can do with smartphone apps these days. I heard her sharp intake of breath. See, that's the thing about being married to an engineer, Elara. We document everything. We plan for contingencies. We solve problems systematically. You can't. I can. I have. And I will. Your suitcase is on the porch. Your car keys are in the mailbox. You have until noon tomorrow to collect anything else you need, and I'll be present for that conversation. Kellan, I ended the call and immediately saved the recording to 3 different cloud storage accounts. Then I called Helena. It's late, she answered, but she sounded wide awake. They're going to escalate, I told her. Mason's threatening lawsuits and professional retaliation. Elara's making noise about having resources. Good, Helena said calmly. Let them. Mason's been suspended pending investigation as of 6 o'clock tonight. HR moved faster than I expected. Suspended? Apparently your documentation was very thorough. Combined with what I provided about the financial irregularities, they had no choice. He's banned from company property until the investigation concludes. I felt something loosen in my chest. What about Elara? She's been reassigned. Away from any projects Mason was involved in, away from any sensitive information. Essentially, they've made her irrelevant while they figure out how much liability she represents. How long do you think the investigation will take? Weeks, maybe months. Long enough for the gossip to destroy what's left of their reputations, and for the company to build a case for termination. We talked for another 10 minutes, coordinating our next steps. Helena was remarkably well informed about corporate politics and surprisingly ruthless in her approach. I was beginning to understand why Mason had underestimated her so badly. After ending the call, I sat in the quiet house and tried to process what had happened. This morning, I'd been a struggling consultant with a failing marriage. Tonight, I was a single man with a clear view of exactly who my wife really was. The strange thing was how calm I felt. No rage, no heartbreak, just cold, crystalline clarity, like a problem that had finally been properly defined. My phone buzzed with another text from Evan. Mason's back at the bar, drunker than before, making threats about you. Want me to handle it? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. No, let him talk. The more he says, the more rope he gives me. Then I added, but keep track of what he says. Everything. Already am. This is better than cable. I smiled for the first time all day. Mason thought he was dealing with the same trusting, naive husband who'd been ignoring the obvious signs for months. He had no idea that version of me had ceased to exist the moment I saw those text messages. The new version was just getting started. I opened a new document on my laptop and titled it Project Reckoning. Then I began outlining Phase 2. Because if Mason wanted to play games with resources and connections, I was more than happy to show him what a motivated engineer could accomplish with proper planning and unlimited time. The hunt was on. I woke up at 5 a.m., showered, and drove to Murphy's Tap to meet Evan before his morning coffee run. The bar looked different in daylight, smaller, more worn, but somehow more honest than it did at night. You look like hell, Evan said, unlocking the front door. Feel worse. I followed him inside, breathing in the familiar smell of old wood and industrial cleaner. Tell me about last night. Evan flipped on the lights and started setting up for the day. Mason showed up around 11, already plastered, started running his mouth about you, about how he was going to sue you for harassment, defamation, the whole list. In front of how many people? Busy night. Maybe 40-50 people heard him, including Jenny Morrison from the newspaper and that lawyer, Patricia Chen, who comes in sometimes. Perfect. Mason's desperation was working in my favor. What else? He kept talking about Elara like she was some kind of victim in all this, said you'd been controlling and paranoid for months, that you'd fabricated evidence to frame them both. I pulled out my phone and showed Evan the recording from last night's call. Think anyone would be interested in hearing Elara's thoughts on Mason's resources and connections? Evan grinned. You're getting scary, you know that? I'm getting focused. We were interrupted by a knock on the door. Through the glass, I could see Talia shifting nervously on the sidewalk. Let her in, I told Evan. This should be interesting. Talia practically burst through the door the moment Evan unlocked it. Kellan! Thank goodness you're here. I've been trying to reach you all night. Have you? I settled onto a bar stool, making no effort to seem welcoming. What about? About Elara. She's devastated. She spent the night in her car because she couldn't get into the house. She spent the night in her car because she chose to. Her suitcase was on the porch, her keys were in the mailbox, and she has a credit card. She could have gone to any hotel in the city. Talia's face flushed. You froze her accounts. I secured my accounts. There's a difference. Kellan, you're being unreasonable. Yes, she made mistakes, but... Mistakes? I turned to face her fully. Talia, she's been having an affair for months. She's been sharing private details about our marriage, our finances, our problems with her lover. She and Mason plan to make me look mentally unstable if I found out. What part of that sounds like a mistake to you? Talia opened her mouth, then closed it again. Here's what I think happened, I continued. I think you knew. Maybe not all the details, but you knew something was going on. And instead of saying anything to me, you helped cover for her. That's not... The girls' nights that ran until 2 a.m., the shopping trips that took all weekend, the work emergencies that required immediate attention on Saturday mornings. You were her alibi, weren't you? Evan had stopped pretending to work and was watching our conversation with obvious fascination. Talia's silence was answer enough. So here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. You're going to leave my friend's bar. You're going to stop trying to contact me. And you're going to think very carefully about whether you want to keep inserting yourself into this situation. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you advice. Because if you keep playing messenger between Elara and me, I might start wondering what other secrets you've been keeping. And I've gotten very good at investigating things lately. Talia stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out without another word. Remind me never to cross you, Evan said after she left. She'll be back, I predicted, but next time she'll be more careful about what she says. My phone rang. Helena. Good morning, she said cheerfully. I have updates. I'm listening. Mason spent last night making a spectacle of himself at several downtown establishments, including threatening you publicly and claiming the evidence against him was fabricated. Evan mentioned that. Well, it gets better. He also tried to access his office remotely this morning. The IT department flagged it immediately. Apparently, he was attempting to delete files from the company server. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Please tell me they caught him. Better than that. They preserved everything he tried to delete and forwarded it to the investigation team. Turns out he was trying to erase expense reports, email chains, and calendar entries. All the things that would prove he'd been using company resources for personal entertainment. How much trouble is he in? Criminally? Probably not much. The amounts involved aren't quite high enough for serious fraud charges. But professionally? He's finished. The company's going to terminate him for cause, which means no severance, no benefits, and no positive references. What about Elara? That's more complicated. She didn't have direct access to company funds, so they can't prove financial misconduct. But the HR investigation is ongoing, and her position has become tenuous. We talked for a few more minutes about next steps. Helena had been busy. She'd already filed for divorce and was working with a forensic accountant to trace Mason's spending patterns. She was also considering a civil suit to recover the money he'd spent on hotels and dinners. After hanging up, I spent the morning working on actual consulting projects. It felt good to focus on something productive, something that wasn't about revenge or betrayal or the collapse of my marriage. But that peace didn't last long. At noon, Elara showed up at the house as I'd expected. She looked terrible. Rumpled clothes, no makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, nothing like the polished professional I'd married. "You look like you had a rough night," I said, opening the door but not inviting her in. "Can we please talk? Like adults?" "We are talking. Inside, Kellan, please." I considered it, then stepped aside to let her enter, but I left the door open and kept my phone recording in my pocket. "Thank you," she said, looking around the living room like she was seeing it for the first time. "This is still my home too." "Actually, it's not. I checked with my lawyer this morning. Since your name isn't on the deed and you haven't been contributing to the mortgage, you have no legal claim to the property." Her face crumpled. "You're really going to throw away 6 years of marriage over this?" "I'm not throwing away anything, Elara. You already did that." It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Mason and I, it just developed. We work together. We have common interests. We understand each other's professional pressures. And I don't? You've been different since you lost your job. Distant, angry. I needed someone who could relate to what I was going through at work. I stared at her, genuinely amazed. "So this is my fault?" "That's not what I'm saying. It sounds exactly like what you're saying. I lost my job, so you decided to console yourself by sleeping with your boss and sharing our private business with him." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Elara? Explain to me how months of lying, cheating, and planning to gaslight me about my mental health was actually something else." She was crying now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no urge to comfort her. Just cold observation of a person I no longer recognized. "I made mistakes," she said finally. "But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through the trust issues." "There are no trust issues," I interrupted. "There's no trust left to have issues about. You destroyed it completely." "So that's it? You're just going to give up?" I walked to the front door and held it open. "I'm not giving up, Elara. I'm accepting reality. You chose Mason over me months ago. I'm just making it official." She gathered her dignity and walked toward the door, then stopped. "You think you've won something here, but you haven't. Mason was right about you. You're small and boring, and you'll never amount to anything. I was settling for you, and we both knew it." I smiled. "Thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me why I'm not going to feel guilty about what happens next." She stared at me, confused and a little frightened, then left without another word. I closed the door, locked it, and saved the recording of our conversation. Then I called Helena. "How do you feel about making things public?" I asked when she answered. "What did you have in mind?" "I think it's time people knew exactly who they've been dealing with." Helena's laugh was sharp and satisfied. "I was hoping you'd say that." The gloves were coming off. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word was spreading faster than I'd anticipated. The first call was from my mother. "Kellan, honey, Mrs. Patterson from down the street just called. She says there's something about Elara on Facebook." The second was from Evan. "Dude, you need to see this. Talia's been busy." I made coffee and opened social media to find that Talia had indeed been busy. She'd posted a long, emotional defense of Elara, painting her as the victim of a controlling, paranoid husband who'd publicly humiliated her over minor marital problems. The post had been shared dozens of times and had generated over 200 comments. Most were supportive of Talia's narrative, but a few people were asking pointed questions about the timeline and the evidence I'd presented. I was reading through the comments when my phone rang. Helena. "Have you seen the social media circus?" she asked. "Just catching up now. Talia's really committed to this narrative." "Well, she's about to get a reality check. I've been in touch with several people who were at Murphy's Tap on Sunday night. when Mason was making his threats. They're willing to provide statements about what they heard. Statements for what? I'm considering a defamation suit against both Mason and anyone who continues to spread false information about the situation. Talia's post contains several claims that can be proven false with the documentation we have. I felt a moment of unease. Helena, I appreciate your support, but I don't want this to become a legal war. I just want them to face consequences for their actions. Sometimes legal action is the only way to ensure consequences. But don't worry, I'm not planning to sue everyone who shares a Facebook post, just the people who are actively trying to damage your reputation with lies. After we hung up, I spent an hour crafting my own social media response. Nothing emotional or defensive, just a calm, factual statement that I had documentation supporting everything I'd revealed, that I welcomed any investigation into the accuracy of my claims, and that I would be taking legal action against anyone who continued to spread demonstrably false information about the situation. I posted it and turned off my phone. Then I drove to Mason's apartment building. I'd looked up his address the week before, during my initial investigation. It was a luxury high-rise downtown, the kind of place that cost more per month than most people made in salary, the kind of place a VP could afford, but probably not for much longer. I parked across the street and waited. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to accomplish. I just wanted to see him, to gauge his state of mind, to understand what I was dealing with. I didn't have to wait long. At 10:30, Mason emerged from the building looking like he'd slept in his clothes. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his face was unshaven, and he was moving with the careful deliberation of someone fighting a serious hangover. He climbed into his BMW, the one with the custom paint job and vanity plates, and pulled into traffic. I followed at a distance, curious about where a suspended executive would go on a Tuesday morning. The answer was, a strip mall law office. I watched him park and disappear into a building that advertised personal injury, divorce, criminal defense in neon letters, the kind of place that took clients other lawyers wouldn't touch. Interesting. I was considering whether to wait for him to come out when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Central Park, noon. Come alone. Elara wanted a clandestine meeting. That suggested she was planning something she didn't want witnessed or recorded. Perfect. I drove to Central Park and found a bench with a clear view of the main entrance. At exactly noon, Elara appeared, looking around nervously before spotting me. "Thank you for coming," she said, sitting down but leaving space between us. "What do you want, Elara?" "I want to make a deal." "I'm listening." She pulled out a manila envelope and set it on the bench between us. "Mason's lawyer thinks you might have obtained some of your evidence illegally, hacking into email accounts, recording conversations without consent, that sort of thing. Mason's lawyer is fishing. Maybe. But even if the evidence is legal, the way you're using it isn't. Public humiliation, social media campaigns, coordinating with Helena to destroy his career, that could be considered harassment." I picked up the envelope but didn't open it. "What's the deal?" "You stop, all of it. No more social media posts, no more coordination with Helena, no more public revelations. In exchange, I'll sign whatever divorce papers you want, and we'll both move on with our lives." "And if I don't?" "Then Mason's lawyer files harassment charges, and we see how well your consulting business survives a criminal investigation." I opened the envelope. Inside was a draft legal complaint accusing me of cyberstalking, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It was poorly written and probably wouldn't survive a serious legal challenge, but it would be expensive and time-consuming to defend against. "You know what's interesting about this?" I said, holding up the complaint. "What?" "It's dated yesterday, before you came to the house asking for reconciliation, before you tried to convince me we could work things out." Elara's face went pale. "So, while you were crying about mistakes and asking for another chance, you were already planning to threaten me with legal action. That's illuminating." "Kellan, no, I get it now. This was never about saving our marriage or making amends. This was about damage control. You and Mason figured out that the evidence I have could destroy both your careers, so you decided to try manipulation first and threats second. I stood up and handed her back the envelope. Here's my counteroffer. No deal. You want to file harassment charges? Go ahead. I'll enjoy explaining to a judge exactly why I had reason to investigate my wife's behavior, and I'll especially enjoy sharing the recordings I have of both you and Mason making threats against me. You're bluffing. Am I? You've known me for 6 years, Elara. When have you ever seen me bluff about something I could prove? She stared at me for a long moment, then looked away. This isn't over, she said quietly. Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet. I walked away, leaving her sitting on the bench with her useless legal threats. But as I drove home, I realized she was right about one thing. This wasn't over. Mason and Elara were desperate now, and desperate people made dangerous choices. I needed to be ready for whatever came next. That evening, Helena called with news. Mason's been terminated, she said without preamble. Effective immediately. Cause: misuse of company resources and violation of professional conduct standards. What about Elara? Still under investigation, but her position has been restructured. Significant pay cut, no access to sensitive projects, and she's been moved to a different department entirely. So she's been demoted. Essentially, yes. The company can't fire her without completing the investigation, but they've made her role irrelevant. I felt a surge of satisfaction, followed immediately by unease. Cornered animals were the most dangerous kind. Helena, I think they're planning something. Elara tried to threaten me with harassment charges today. Let them try. I've been documenting everything, and I have witnesses to Mason's public threats. Any lawyer worth their fee would advise them to cut their losses and disappear quietly. What if they don't take that advice? Helena's voice turned cold. Then they'll learn why that would be a mistake. After hanging up, I double-checked the locks on my doors and made sure my security cameras were working properly. I had the feeling I was going to need them. The final act was about to begin. Thursday morning brought the kind of autumn storm that reminded you winter was coming. Rain hammered against my windows as I sat in my study, reviewing consulting contracts and trying to maintain some semblance of normal life. My phone rang at 8:30. Unknown number. Kellan Brooks. You think you're clever? Mason's voice, slurred with alcohol or exhaustion. You think you've won? Mason, it's 8:30 in the morning. Are you drinking? Don't patronize me. I know what you did. I documented what you did. There's a difference. You ruined my life over a simple workplace relationship. You couldn't handle that your wife found someone better. I put the call on speaker and started recording. Is that what you're calling it now? A workplace relationship? Elara and I connected on a professional level. We understood each other's ambitions, supported each other's goals, something you were never capable of. By using company funds to pay for hotel rooms? Those were legitimate business expenses. For a business that involved sleeping with my wife? Silence on the other end. Mason, you embezzled company money to fund an affair. You shared confidential information with someone outside your department. You created a hostile work environment and then tried to cover it up by threatening the people who exposed you. None of that is a simple workplace relationship. You don't understand the pressures of executive leadership. I understand that you're a predator who used his position to manipulate a subordinate employee, then used company resources to hide the evidence. She wasn't a subordinate. Elara is a capable, independent professional who made her own choices. Then why are you calling me instead of letting her handle her own problems? Another long silence. This isn't over, Mason said finally. Yes, it is. You just haven't figured that out yet. I ended the call and immediately sent the recording to Helena and my lawyer. An hour later, Evan called. You need to get down here, he said. Now. What's wrong? Mason's here. He's been drinking since we opened, and he's getting aggressive. talking about finding you, settling things like men. I think he's working up the courage to do something stupid. Call the police. And tell them what? That a drunk guy is talking tough? They'll laugh me off the phone. I grabbed my jacket and keys. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Don't let him leave. How am I supposed to stop him? Keep serving him. Drunk people don't make good decisions, but they also don't move very fast. Murphy's tap was nearly empty when I arrived. Just Mason hunched over the bar, 2 construction workers playing pool, and an elderly woman reading a newspaper in the corner booth. "Kellan!" Mason's voice boomed across the room. "Perfect timing!" He spun around on his bar stool, nearly losing his balance. His shirt was stained, and he smelled like he'd been marinating in whiskey for hours. "Hello, Mason. Come to gloat? Come to see what you've accomplished?" "Actually, I came because my friend was worried you might hurt yourself." Mason laughed bitterly. "Hurt myself? You've already done that. Job gone, wife filing for divorce, reputation destroyed. What's left to hurt? Your dignity, maybe, though you seem to be working on that too." The construction workers had stopped playing pool and were watching our conversation with interest. The elderly woman had folded her newspaper and was openly staring. "You know what the funny thing is?" Mason continued, his voice getting louder. "I actually felt sorry for you. Married to that ambitious, beautiful woman, and you couldn't even keep her interested. I was doing you a favor." "A favor?" "Showing her what a real man looked like. Someone with vision, with power, with the ability to give her the life she deserved." "By stealing money from your employer?" "By investing in our future. Those trips, those dinners, they were about building something together. They were about you using company funds to impress my wife." Mason stood up abruptly, swaying slightly. "Your wife?" "She stopped being your wife the moment she realized what you really are." "And what am I, Mason?" "A failure. A small, boring, inadequate failure who couldn't satisfy his own wife." The room had gone completely quiet. Even the background music seemed muted. "You're probably right," I said calmly. "I am small and boring. I don't have executive presence or corporate connections. I can't afford luxury apartments or expensive dinners." Mason smiled triumphantly. "But I also don't steal money from my employer. I don't manipulate subordinates into compromising positions. I don't threaten people who discover my crimes. And I don't get drunk at 9 in the morning and make a spectacle of myself in public." Mason's smile faded. "So, yes, I'm small and boring. But you're unemployed, divorced, and facing potential criminal charges. Between the two of us, who's really the failure here?" Mason's face turned red. "You sanctimonious little—" He lunged toward me, but alcohol had made him clumsy. I stepped aside easily, and he stumbled into a table, sending glasses crashing to the floor. "That's enough," Evan said firmly, coming around the bar. "Mason, you're cut off. Time to go." "I'm not done with him." Mason struggled to his feet, pointing at me accusingly. "He destroyed my life." "You destroyed your own life," I replied. "I just documented it." One of the construction workers approached us. "Everything okay here?" "Fine," I said. "Mr. Reddan was just leaving." "I'm not going anywhere until—" "Until what?" I interrupted. "Until you assault me in front of witnesses, until you give me grounds for a restraining order, until you make your legal situation even worse than it already is?" Mason stared at me, breathing heavily. "Go home, Mason. Sleep it off. Call your lawyer. Figure out how to rebuild your life without blaming other people for your choices." For a moment, I thought he might try to hit me anyway. But then his shoulders sagged, and he looked around the room at the faces watching him. "This isn't over," he mumbled. "Yes," I said quietly. "It is." Mason stumbled toward the door, pausing only to glare back at me once before disappearing into the rain. The construction worker who'd approached us earlier clapped me on the shoulder. "Handled that well. Guy's got serious problems." "Yeah," I agreed, watching through the window as Mason fumbled with his car keys in the parking lot. "He does." Evan called the police to report a potentially drunk driver, giving them Mason's license plate number and description. Then he poured me a coffee and sat down across from me. "Feel better?" he asked. "Actually, yeah, I do." And I did. For months, Mason had been this looming figure in my imagination. Powerful, connected, dangerous. Seeing him reduced to a drunk, desperate man ranting in a nearly empty bar had stripped away the last of his mystique. He wasn't a master manipulator or a corporate titan. He was just a middle-aged man who'd made selfish choices and was now facing the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Helena. Mason's lawyer withdrew from the case this morning. Apparently, Mason can't afford to pay him anymore. I showed the message to Evan, who grinned. "Think it's really over?" he asked. I looked out at the rain, thinking about Elara sitting alone in her diminished office, about Mason driving home to his empty apartment, about the gossip that would follow them both for months or years. "Yeah," I said finally, "I think it is." But I was wrong. There was still one more act to play out. That evening, Elara showed up at my door for the last time. She looked different, older somehow, worn down by the events of the past week. "I'm leaving," she said without preamble. "Okay. Taking a job in Seattle. Fresh start." "Good for you." She studied my face, looking for some reaction. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" "What would you like me to say, Elara?" "I don't know. Something. Anything. We were married for 6 years. I leaned against the doorframe, considering her request. 6 years, I repeated. "You're right. 6 years of building a life together, sharing dreams, supporting each other through difficulties. 6 years of trust and intimacy and partnership." Her eyes filled with tears. "And you threw all of that away for a few months with a man who used company money to impress you and then abandoned you the moment things got difficult." The tears spilled over. "So no, I don't have anything else to say. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it." She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. "For what it's worth," she said quietly. "I am sorry. Not about Mason. I'm not going to lie and say that was a mistake. But I'm sorry about how I handled things. The lies, the manipulation, the planning. You didn't deserve that." "No," I agreed. "I didn't." She turned to go, then stopped. "Will you be okay?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time. The woman I'd loved, planned a future with, trusted completely. The woman who'd betrayed that trust so thoroughly that I felt nothing for her now except a kind of distant pity. "I'll be fine," I said. "I always was fine. You just convinced yourself I wasn't so you could justify what you wanted to do anyway." She stared at me for a long moment, then walked away into the rain. I closed the door, locked it, and went back to my study. There was work to do, a business to build, a life to reconstruct. But first, I poured myself 3 fingers of good whiskey and raised a toast to my empty house. "Happy birthday to me," I said aloud. The knife's finally out of my back. Outside, the storm was clearing, and for the first time in months, I could see stars. The reckoning was complete.